Yo, what is good, my anime people? Checking if I'm muted, my anime people. Yo, guys, I apologize for this late video and the next, but definitely had to get some shopping done and getting my place checked out over time, so I do truly apologize for the late uploads, but man. I gotta just say it, this was probably one of the more boring episodes of Shield Heroes simply because they needed to really work out all of the dumb stuff that these idiotas have been doing all this time, and he needed to put them on blast so they understand that nothing they were really doing was helping anybody as much as it was hurting people. So I understand why this episode happened the way it did. It just felt like we had the Pope and all the stuff that popped off with him. And then literally we didn't get anywhere from knowing the Pope. This whole episode was the enemy and, being confronted with him the whole entire time. Nothing really happened amongst that. So in my opinion, that is just a really weird way of having an episode sit on the fact that there's an enemy afoot, but at the same time, no one's really doing anything to actually stop, um, to actually stop the whole entire horde of people that are helping the Pope. They're just sitting there bickering amongst each other for most of the episode. And the Pope allows it because why would he stop it when it could be a good time to fill up his energy for another attack? So it's not his fault that literally not much happened. I mean, the most that happened was finding out that the sword and the bow guy were still alive. So I don't know why this episode did this way, like where they even introduce back the characters who we believe were dead and they still show up and don't do anything. So not sure whose idea it was to have this episode play out this way, but definitely wasn't the greatest episode out of all the episodes we've seen. It was needed in the overall sense of just explanation and telling us what's going on. But after we got past the explanation, the episode was over. Like everything was coming to an end. So it just felt very lackluster compared to what seemingly they could have done, knowing that we have the Pope already figured out that he's, trying to straight up end the people that are good and trying to help. And I mean, I guess the Pope isn't really wrong for doing these things because if you think about it, what was going on outside of when the heroes were helping people? They were actually making things worse. So there you go. He had a decent reason because all of the heroes were doing quite trashly, if you ask me. So, or if you ask our boy who hates them all with a passion. But yeah, hearing that they're gonna work together and them using that as like the highlight biggest thing of this episode that happened was just kind of lackluster to me. It just didn't feel very, I don't know. It just felt like this whole episode was just a big explainer and then now we're just gonna move on, and still be in the same fight for like 3 episodes and ended on the third episode. It just feels weird to me. Or like they just wanted to really pad this whole exchange out for some reason, and then once this exchange is done, we might have a little bit more of a straightforward narrative where this a one area fight doesn't last for this long, just trying to figure out what they're gonna do to each other or whatever. So yeah, that's probably my only complaint about this week's episode. Uh, just the fact that we could have gotten so much more probably accomplished, like actually getting the heroes outside of this crater, and now they literally were sitting there bickering for so long that this man has summoned a new attack called the Cathedral, and it looks like it's about to body everybody. So another great way of explaining how lackluster this episode was. They literally sat still long enough for not only one attack to be filled up, but then another attack to be filled up and it be their actual final attack. So I don't know. this episode definitely wasn't what I expected at all. I expected a decent fight. I expected some action, which we got some, but it was literally just the shield hero blocking and then the Pope blocking the spear hero. And then that was it. Like, we've already practically had seen that already. I mean, besides the us attacking him, that's the only thing we hadn't really seen that they added in this week's episode. Not to mention the bow and the shield guy, like I said earlier. But yeah, I really was like, I felt like the episode was moving really quickly. Like, it was a shorter episode and everything just because of how isolated and slow they were going through all this exposition of how the sword guy got out and the bow guy got out, and it wasn't even like it really explained it. They're like, oh, we went here and found information, and then when we found that information, we went to another area where that information led us, and after we got there, we got attacked. That was it. Like, that was literally it. And then he's like, oh, the reason why we didn't die is because some women from the Queen were there to help us. Like, okay, and why did this story take this long, or why are we explaining this while we could be fighting or figuring out why we're not working together? It just felt like a lot of stuff was forced in this episode to make sure it didn't go anywhere further than they didn't want it. So that's kind of my frustration, is seeing that there's the potential to end something and then you just wait it out because you felt like that's a better choice. Um, Unless the next week's episode comes and completely shuts me up and has hype action and it's only action throughout the whole episode until they defeat the Pope and get out scot-free and all this and that, I don't really see myself, believing this is going to end in the next week's episode just by how they played this well now. Like, what's stopping them from dragging this out a whole nother episode and not giving us the exposition of why the Pope is doing what he's doing after he gets beat up a little bit? You know what I mean? Like, I can come up with 100 things now that they could do, seeing how it's possible for them to do it after this episode, which is not, it's not the best thing in my opinion. But I mean, some people probably love this episode and are going to, stand by it hand in hand. So that's always awesome. But at the same time, it just wasn't an episode for me, I guess you can say. It just wasn't, it didn't really do anything for me. It really just explained the things I've already gone over, and another fact that Nagami he doesn't trust them still. Like, that's as much as I could tell you throughout this whole entire episode. And that's not just me like jumping around looking for stuff that was like hype and then I'm leaving stuff out. That was everything, guys. Everything that happened in this episode. The Pope reveals that his sword can turn into a spear. They find out that that's the ancient weapon, that everybody was blah 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 blah, and then they bicker amongst themselves, and then the cathedral shows up. That's the whole entire episode, guys. Nagami blocks 2 attacks, and then the 3rd attack comes out, and it's the cathedral. Like, holy crap, this was a lackluster episode, man. They could have did so much with this, and instead we get the sword and bow guy doing 2 attacks that completely fail, or that did better than the spear guy's attack, and then no one does anything to follow it up. It's like they're brain dead at this point. It's so disappointing to see how all this played out this week. I went from completely thinking this show could do almost no wrong to literally just blowing my expectations out of the water, in the sense of it was horrid. Like, this was you could just call this a filler episode with a little bit of details of what's going to come next week. Okay? I could have seen I could see 2 things that happened in this week's episode, and then see next week and still get the same explanation as I did this week, probably next week. And that's what these shows do. They don't just give you the next episode and start it up, because as you see, we started back where they were explaining, how they felt about the spear hero and stuff. Like, they didn't even start as literally where we left off. So good luck with all that. For the people who love these types of episodes, I can't. I just can't. It was just a waste of time. And then when it wasn't a waste of time, guess what happens? Oh my god, action happens. That's what happens when you're not wasting our time. So, I don't know. Shield Hero this week, I definitely will give it the worst grade it's ever had by starting up something and then not knowing that you should probably continue to push the narrative even further than it already has been from the last episode. But hey, I don't create anime and animation and all that stuff. I guess I don't know what I'm talking about, right? Because this episode was foolproof, right, everybody? Every so anybody that disagrees with me, you can let me know in the comments. You can unsubscribe. You can, whatever you want because I feel my type of way towards this. But regardless of the fact, I'm not backing down off of any types of feelings that I feel towards this because I have no reason to. There's no reason for me to lie about how I feel about a freaking anime, including when you can go back and watch all my other reviews and see that I was absolutely enjoying it. And then now it's just a different story, okay? So, with all that being said, I hope you guys have an amazing day, night, evening, whatever the case may be. I will be dropping another video very soon here, so make sure you have your notification bell on and you have the subscribe on. I don't know if you're going to be subbed after this video of me talking about Shield Hero, but that's just the honest, brutal truth of what happens sometimes with these shows that you really, really can't predict all the things that are going to happen. And unfortunate for me, it wasn't the best of episodes, so whatever, it happens. With that being said, though, I'll talk to you in the next one. Peace.